As we approach the holiday of Thanksgiving in just a few short weeks, many of us are looking forward to gathering with family and friends, sharing meals, and reflecting on what we're grateful for. It's a time to cherish those we hold dear and celebrate the connections we have. But for some families, this season comes with a heavy heart. They face an empty chair at their table, missing someone who has disappeared, leaving behind only unanswered questions and an unfillable void. For them, there are no answers, and the holidays are a painful reminder of their loved one's absence. As we gather this Thanksgiving, let's take a moment to appreciate the people around us, those who fill our lives with love and laughter, and let's also remember those families who continue to seek answers for a missing loved one. The journey for justice and answers is a long one for them, and while they hold on to hope, we can honor their struggle by never taking for granted the precious time we have with the people who matter most. Hold your loved ones close, and never forget the importance of being present in each other's lives. For some, those moments are the most cherished memories they have left. Join me for a ride through the odd and mysterious with Odd Mystery Stories. In the heart of Alabama, amidst the quiet countryside of Montgomery, lies a mystery that has left a family broken and a community haunted. What began as a peaceful Thanksgiving weekend at the family's hunting camp ended in one of the state's most baffling cold cases. Mont Highley IV, a man known for his love of life and the outdoors, vanished without a trace, only for his body to be discovered weeks later in an abandoned grain silo surrounded by eerie and unexplained clues. Why was his vehicle left at a different location? What significance did the neatly folded clothing on his body hold? And perhaps the most haunting question of all, who could have wanted Mont dead? For over 2 decades, these questions have swirled throughout Montgomery, leaving both family and investigators at a loss. In this video, I'll delve deep into this unsolved case, a story filled with strange discoveries, unanswered questions, and chilling possibilities. As I unravel the events that led to Mont Highley's untimely death, you may begin to wonder, what secrets still linger in the shadows of that quiet Alabama farmland? Stay with me as I uncover the twists and the turns of a case that continues to defy explanation. Mont Highley IV was a man full of life. At 33 years old, he had built strong ties to his hometown of Montgomery, Alabama, and was known for his adventurous spirit, particularly his love for the outdoors and hunting. Mont was often described as carefree, full of laughter, and someone who cherished the time he spent with his family and friends. On November 27, 2003, Mont gathered with his family for Thanksgiving dinner. His father, Dr. Mont Highley III, and his mother, Gail, recalled that Mont seemed quieter than usual during the meal. It was an unusual shift in his demeanor, but not enough to raise immediate concern. Mont had always been a man who lived life on his own terms, so if something was on his mind, it wasn't out of character for him to keep it to himself. The Highley family, like many, cherished Thanksgiving as a time to come together and celebrate. For Mont, this holiday was typically followed by a weekend filled with one of his favorite activities, hunting. The family owned a hunting camp in Shorter, Alabama, about 40 minutes from their Montgomery home. It was a special treat, a place where Mont and his father often spent their weekends bonding over their shared love of the outdoors. However, what made this Thanksgiving different was a decision Mont made the following day. Originally, he had planned to go to the camp with his father on Saturday, November 29th, but for reasons still unknown, he changed his plans. On Friday, November 28th, Black Friday, Mont decided to head out to the camp a day earlier than expected. He left his parents home that afternoon, telling them he would see them the next day. Mont's decision to leave earlier was one of the first unusual details in what would soon become an unsolved mystery. He didn't give much of an explanation for why he was going ahead without his father. Could something have been on his mind? Was he meeting someone? His family didn't know, and Mont, always independent, gave no further indication that anything was wrong. Before leaving, Mont made a brief phone call. His mother remembered seeing him in the kitchen, talking on his phone and chuckling at whoever was on the other end of the line. It seemed like a light-hearted conversation, but Gail couldn't hear the specifics or who Mont was speaking to. This call, along with his early departure, would be one of the last pieces of communication his family would have with him. Looking back, Mont's family couldn't have predicted that these small changes in his routine, the early trip to the hunting camp, and the mysterious phone call, would be the starting point of a mystery that would go on to haunt them for decades. Mont's decision to leave early set off a series of events that would leave his family searching for answers, and his hometown of Montgomery wondering what happened in the final hours of his life. What prompted Mont to leave earlier than expected? Was there something he didn't share with his family that was on his mind? Who was on the other end of that phone call, and could that person hold a key piece to the puzzle? On the afternoon of November 28, 2003, after Mont Highley left his parents' home in Montgomery, he was on his way to the family hunting camp in Schroeder, Alabama. He had initially planned to leave the next day with his father, but for reasons unknown, he decided to head out early. At this point, it was a seemingly ordinary day. Mont was going hunting, something he loved, and there was nothing out of the ordinary that would raise concern. These appear to be the last traceable activities after leaving home. Mont made a stop at a gas station off of County Road 30, near the exit to the camp. While there, he purchased beer and made a phone call to one of his close friends. He invited the friend to join him at the camp for a weekend of hunting. But unfortunately, his friend had other plans and couldn't make it. This phone call, along with a few others recorded later that evening, would be Mont's last attempts to reach out to anyone before the events of that night took a darker turn. Between 8 p.m. and 9:35 p.m., Mont made several more phone calls. While it's not entirely clear whom all of these calls were made to, records show that they were the last communications from Mont's phone. After 9:35 p.m., his phone went silent. Whether Mont had been in contact with someone he knew, or if his plans had suddenly changed, remains one of the lingering questions of this case. His family, unaware of what was to come, assumed Mont was simply settling in for the night at the hunting camp. When Mont's father, Dr. Highley, arrived at the camp the next day, the first signs of something being wrong began to surface. The gate to the property, which was normally locked, was left wide open. The mobile home's door was ajar, and the lights were still on. The TV blared from inside, as if Mont had left suddenly, not intending to be gone for long. However, there was no sign of Mont or his green Tahoe anywhere. Dr. Highley assumed Mont had changed his plans again and possibly gone to watch the Alabama football game with friends in town. This was typical for Mont. He could be spontaneous, and maybe he'd simply decided to join his friends at the last minute. But as the hours went by, the realization set in that something was very wrong. Mont hadn't returned, and there was no communication from him. By Sunday, November 30th, Dr. Highley received a phone call that would set off a frantic search for his son. Mont's green Tahoe had been found parked on the property of a family acquaintance, Dale Segrest, just a couple of miles away from the hunting camp. The vehicle was locked, and inside there was no sign of a struggle. Mont's wallet, containing $200 in cash, his keys, briefcase, and his rifle were all left untouched in the car. His family immediately knew that this was not normal. Mont would never leave without these essentials, especially not his rifle. The panic set in quickly. Mont's family began to reach out to friends and local hospitals, hoping for any news. They even drove to their house in Lake Martin, thinking Mont may have gone there, but it was empty. There was no sign of him. The family filed a missing person report, and by the next day, a full-scale search had begun. Helicopters, search dogs, and hundreds of volunteers combed the woods around the camp, but still, there was no trace of Mont. Dr. Highley found more concerning signs. On the porch were Mont's boots, left as if he'd taken them off before stepping inside. Inside the trailer, the mystery deepened further. Mont's pants were found, soaked from the knees down. Oddly, the water only reached his upper thighs, suggesting he may have walked through shallow water, but no one knew where or why. His phone, along with another $100 in cash, was still in one of his pockets. These unsettling discoveries would only add to the confusion surrounding Mont's sudden disappearance. How could his belongings be left so neatly behind, yet there was no sign of a struggle? Why were his pants wet? And what happened after his final phone call? Who was Mont speaking with during those final phone calls? Why did his phone activity suddenly stop after 9:35 p.m.? Was there something more to his decision to leave Montgomery earlier than planned? And what about the wet pants? Was Mont walking through water? And if so, why? On Saturday, November 29, 2003, was supposed to be an ordinary day for Dr. Mont Highley III and his son. They had planned to meet at the family's hunting camp in Schroeder, Alabama, for a weekend of hunting, just as they had done countless times before. But when Dr. Highley arrived at the camp that afternoon, the scene that greeted him was far from ordinary. It would mark the beginning of a chilling mystery that remains unsolved. The next day, November 30th, 2003, brought even more alarming news. Dr. Highley received a call from Dale Segrest, a local acquaintance who lived a few miles away from the camp. Segrest informed him that Mont's green Tahoe had been found on his property, parked at the edge of a field. The vehicle had been sitting there unnoticed for some time, and Segrest, assuming it was connected to someone else, hadn't paid it much attention. When Dr. Highley and the authorities arrived to inspect the vehicle, the scene only added to the mystery. Mont's Tahoe was locked, and inside were all of his personal belongings, his wallet with $200 in cash, his rifle, his car keys, and his briefcase. Nothing was missing, and there was no signs of a struggle. Everything seemed untouched, as if Mont had simply vanished, leaving all of his most important items behind. This discovery raised immediate concerns, as Mont would never willingly abandon his rifle, especially when hunting. By the end of the day, it was clear Mont was missing, and the family filed a formal report with the local sheriff's office. A race against time began, with temperatures dipping into the mid-30s at night. The family and authorities became increasingly concerned for Mont's safety. The possibility that he was lost in the woods, exposed to the harsh elements without proper clothing, was very concerning. A massive search operation was launched, involving hundreds of volunteers, law enforcement officers, and even tracking dogs for the nearby Kilby prison. Helicopters scanned the area, and search teams combed through the woods around the camp, but no trace of Mont was found. The discovery of Mont's personal belongings in the Tahoe, combined with the strange condition of his wet pants and his abandoned boots, left investigators with more questions than answers. How could Mont's vehicle have ended up on the Segrest property over 2 miles away? Why had he left behind his wallet, rifle, and phone, all while the camp appeared as if he had simply stepped away for a moment? These unsettling details would only deepen the mystery in the weeks to come. As days turned into weeks, the disappearance of Mont Highley IV continued to baffle everyone involved in the search. Despite the massive efforts by law enforcement, volunteers, and even tracking dogs, no substantial clues surfaced that could explain Mont's sudden disappearance. His family, friends, and the community of Montgomery were left grappling with fear and confusion as the days stretched on. Still, no one was prepared for what would be discovered nearly 2 months later. On January 14, 2004, more than 6 weeks after Mont had gone missing, a local resident named Johnny Johnson made a gruesome discovery. While on his family's property, behind the Back 40 restaurant on County Road 30, just a few miles from the hunting camp, Johnny noticed something strange inside an old, unused grain silo. He had been walking around the grounds when he peered inside the silo and saw the remains of a body. He immediately notified Alabama Conservation Officer Keith Mann, who then contacted law enforcement. When the authorities arrived, the body was suspected to be that of Mont Highley IV. The badly decomposed remains were found inside the silo, which hadn't been used for decades. Investigators would later identify him through dental records. The shocking discovery sent ripples through the community, as people wondered how Mont's body ended up in such an isolated place. The condition in which Mont's body was found only added to the growing list of disturbing and puzzling details in this case. Most unsettling was the fact that a pair of jeans pants were found neatly folded and placed atop his body. Investigators found this particularly odd, as it suggested that someone had taken care to arrange the scene deliberately. Even more strange was the fact that Mont's $600 watch was still on his wrist when his body was found. This piece of information quickly ruled out robbery as a potential motive. Additionally, Mont's wallet, which had been left inside his Tahoe, along with $200 in cash, further supported the idea that robbery wasn't involved. These unusual details left investigators and Mont's family questioning what had truly happened to him. The location of the grain silo where Mont was found raised even more questions. It was located just outside the original search boundaries, which led to speculation about whether Mont's body had been placed there after the initial search efforts. Some locals even claimed that the silo had been searched during the early days of Mont's disappearance, but authorities insisted it hadn't been part of the official search grid. To this day, it remains unclear how Mont's body ended up in that grain silo. Did someone move his body there after he was already deceased? Or had he somehow ended up there on his own before he died? The answers to these questions have never been found, and they are among the most perplexing aspects of the case. While Mont's body was identified through dental records, the actual cause of his death remains unknown. Despite an autopsy being performed, the Alabama Department of Forensic Sciences did not release a definitive cause of death. This lack of clarity further deepened the mystery, leaving Mont's family in a painful limbo, unable to fully understand what happened to their son. Adding to the frustration, investigators remained tight-lipped about evidence that they had collected, if any. Mont's family, who had been desperately searching for answers, received little information from law enforcement, and the case began to go cold. The eerie details of pants being folded and the lack of any apparent motive left everyone with more questions than answers. Following the discovery of Mont's body, former Alabama Governor Bob Riley issued a $5,000 reward for information leading to the arrest and conviction of those responsible for his death. Despite this, no significant leads emerged and no arrests were made. The case hit a wall, and as months turned into years, it seemed that justice for Mont would remain elusive. To this day, the mystery surrounding Mont Highley's death continues to weigh heavily on his family and community. How did Mont end up in that grain silo? And who folded those pants and left them so neatly on his body? And most chillingly, who, if anyone, is responsible for his death? The discovery of Mont Highley's body in the abandoned grain silo may have answered one question, where he had been for those long agonizing weeks, but it left so many more questions in its wake. The strange details surrounding his disappearance and death continue to puzzle both investigators and his family to this day. The fact that Mont's wallet, rifle, and expensive watch were found untouched raised doubts about robbery as a motive. The wet pants at the cabin and the folded neatly pair on top of his body only deepened the mystery, pointing toward the possibility that whoever was responsible for Mont's death may have known him personally. It seemed like an act of care, or perhaps a deliberate gesture, to fold his clothing in such a way. But what could it mean? Despite the best efforts of law enforcement and Mont's family, the case quickly went cold. No suspects have ever been named publicly, and the investigation remains open, but inactive. The lack of concrete evidence has left investigators without a clear path forward. Although the Alabama Department of Forensic Sciences performed an autopsy, the exact cause of Mont's death remains unclear, and the investigators have never released further details about how he died. The lack of information has been a source of deep frustration for Mont's family. Over the years, they've questioned why more details haven't come to light. Did Mont know the person responsible for his death? Was it a tragic accident, or was there something more sinister at play? Was there a cover-up? These questions haunt the Highley family as they continue to search for the truth. Mont's parents, Dr. Highley and Gail, have never stopped seeking answers. Despite the passage of time, their hope for justice has not wavered. They have worked closely with various organizations and advocates, such as the Alabama Cold Case Advocacy, to keep Mont's story alive and to encourage anyone with information to come forward. For them, the pain of losing their son is compounded by the agonizing uncertainty of not knowing how or why he died. The Highley family remains committed to uncovering the truth, hoping that, one day, someone will come forward with the missing piece of the puzzle. As the years have passed, the mystery surrounding Mont's death has only deepened. How did his vehicle end up on a different property with all of his personal belongings left untouched? And most hauntingly, who was responsible for his death, and why has no one been held accountable? These are the questions that still loom large over the case. The community of Montgomery continues to wonder what happened on that fateful weekend in November of 2003. As time marches on, the trail has grown cold, but the Highley family's resolve remains strong. Despite the years of silence and uncertainty, Mont's family holds on to hope that one day the truth will come to light, hope that someone, somewhere, holds the key to unlocking this mystery. For Dr. Highley and Gail, justice for their son is not just about closure, it's about honoring Mont's life and finding peace in the knowledge that they did everything in their power to uncover what truly happened to Mont. Could new information come to light that would finally answer the lingering questions in Mont Highley's case? Will someone with knowledge of what happened that night come forward, even after all of these years? What do you believe happened to Mont Highley, and could this case ever be solved? Hey, thanks once again for watching my video. My name is Vince. Would you please consider supporting the channel by either buying me a cup of coffee at the link below, or even treating yourself to some merchandise at my online shop? I truly appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this story, you might also enjoy the story of the Mayarova family. You will find the link to that story in the upper right corner of your screen. Thank you.